to myself again. But it's the only...
Good afternoon and welcome to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith. I'm joined by Ian Mearns, the MP for Gateshead. Good afternoon, Ian.
Hello, Steve. Nice to see you again.
And you, mate. Great to see you. Let's start with the football. And wow, I didn't see that coming last night. Newcastle United winning 2-0 at Crystal Palace. Quite a shock. And I've called it a smash and grab. I still don't think I'm out of order calling it that, because the stats show that it was a fairly even game. It wasn't the greatest. It wasn't the greatest of matches, but the last couple of minutes, Newcastle stole the point.
Well, absolutely, and I think when you say you didn't see that coming, I didn't see it coming with 5 minutes to go. I just didn't. So it's a scoreline that belies the performance from my perspective. But you've got to take every positive way you can, and the ultimate goal from my perspective this season is to make sure that we're absolutely safe.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely always what Newcastle set out to achieve. Staying in the Premier League in safety. No more so than this season with a takeover still looming over the club. It's no good if the drop into the Championship. Obviously there was a few changes last night. I think the one that we talked about pre-match last night was John Joe Shelvey coming straight back in and getting the captaincy. What did you make of that?
Well, interesting. I don't think he had a dreadful performance. I still don't see him as a captain. I still think there's some significant question marks over Jeff Hendrick, though. I'm not exactly sure what he does and adds to the team. But Shelvey didn't have a dreadful game by any, and I'm not a big fan. So I just think that it was. I think a reasonable performance from him.
Yeah, it was all right. I just found it a bit strange that he was coming straight back into the team, I've got to be honest. But, it is what it is. Joelinton, I've seen it today. Twitter, of course, we've talked about it before we came on air. It's a bit of a knee-jerk social media place, and people who were slating Steve Bruce and wouldn't have had Joelinton in anywhere near the team before kick-off are now saying that Steve Bruce is as good as Rafa and Joelinton is finally turned the corner. I've even seen an article in The Athletic today where they've essentially said that we've now found the best way to the way to get the best out of Joelinton. I mean, it's a little bit too much, I think. Look, we've won a game at Crystal Palace. It was a big win. It was a 6-pointer, I said before the match, and it was a great to get off to great to get those 3 points in the bag. But we need a little bit of a dose of reality, and don't we? That this hasn't changed anything. Bruce is still a poor manager, and Joelinton is still not a £40 million striker.
Right on both counts, full stop, really. I mean, I think to be fair, I've got a bit of a WhatsApp group between some of my mates that were all watching the match at the same time. And before the goals at the end, the general consensus was that Joelinton had a better game last night. That was before, but that, a better game than anything that had gone previous, which was fairly limited from that perspective. So it's an improvement on really quite poor stuff previously. Look, we've had this discussion before, Steve. I still think potentially there might be a player in there, but he really does need to have some significant finishing practice. I mean, even the goal was a billiards shot. It was an in-off, So, I think if it hadn't hit the defender, I think the keeper would have had it covered because there's no power in it whatsoever.
No, there wasn't. I mean, it's funny that every goal Joelinton scores seems to have some kind of deflection or whatever. He's very rare that he scores a really clean-cut goal. But look, he'll take it. He got a goal, and I'm sure he was really happy about that. The big talking point before the game, other than the team selection, was the fact that ASM was booked on the flight but didn't get on it. Lots of talk, lots of rumours about ASM. I'm sure Steve Bruce will keep it in-house, but people are leaking the story that there's been some kind of fallout between them. People were looking curiously at Steve Bruce's face as well, as saying that there seemed to be some bruising on there, which maybe he just banged into a door. Who knows? But it's a strange one, isn't it? Because ASM, I think we've spoken about it. You've been on the show when we've spoken about it. He signed that new contract and then he hasn't really played well since. I mean, people could point to Aubameyang at Arsenal and say exactly the same about him. Of course, he was the top goal scorer last season. Firing on all cylinders. He's going through a bad run of form since signing his new contract as well. But yeah, ASM hasn't looked happy, and the fact that he was dropped because of an injury didn't really add up yesterday when he was still booked on that flight.
Yeah, well, I was wondering whether he'd be named as one of the people who's allegedly got COVID-19 within the squad, but apparently not. So I think it remains to be seen what's actually happened. Maybe he's they thought it was going to be too cold for him or something. But I think he's an enigma on Saint-Maximin. But in the bottom of my heart, I actually think he's starting to look like a bit of a luxury player.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. He's, it could be a little. Is it a touch of like the Ben Arthurs? Do you think? Somebody who has one good game in so often, and we're going to end up carrying him. Is that what you feel?
Well, I do. I mean, I'm not really sure what else he adds to the team. I mean, he doesn't provide a significant amount of assists, and he scores the occasional really good goal. But I've said it before. I'd rather have a good goal scorer than a scorer of good goals.
Yeah, fair enough. We won with 10 men as Hendrick was like the invisible man, says Chippers. Yeah, he's not a popular player amongst the supporters, Hendrick, is he? But he's one of those players, I suppose, who does the dirty work. I mean, Hendrick was in there, Longstaff was in again. But what did you make of those two last night?
Well, I thought, like it's just been said, I thought Hendrick was largely invisible. I thought Longstaff, did okay, but I thought that we just seemed to me to be defending far too deeply, and I would like to see us like sort of moving up the pitch 10 or 15 yards, and that includes the midfield. I think we've had the discussion regarding Darlow and how many saves he's having to make. It's just far too much. I mean, the reflection of the number of saves that Darlow is having to make is not on how good he is, because he's doing really quite well in the circumstances, but it's the fact he's having to save all of these attempts is a reflection on the 10 outfield players, frankly.
Yeah, it was a discussion last night amongst the supporters, and it's a question we always seem to get asked, and is if Darlow has played well, but we've seen the stats, it backs it up. Are you going to put Dubravka straight back in? He's getting closer to fitness. Would you let Darlow fight him out for it? Would you keep Darlow in until he has a bad game, or he gets injured himself?
Well, I think the thing is that Darlow is playing well. And therefore, from that perspective, I would rather than rush Dubravka back, I would let Dubravka get the full fitness rather than putting him back in anywhere near early. So, I would like this, give Darlow a couple of weeks at least after Dubravka's fit to make sure that he's completely and utterly fully fit.
Yeah, I would agree. Liam says, you confident against Villa on Friday? I think we'll draw against them and Villa, but beat West Brom and Fulham. Some big games coming up. I mean, before last night's result, looking ahead to the fixtures, obviously we do have Aston Villa next. Then we have West Brom. Then we have Leeds. Then we've got Fulham. And then we've got the Brentford game. It's a big opportunity to pick some points up here now.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the weaknesses of last season, from my perspective, was the fact that we didn't pick up the points against the bottom sides. So, we've got to make sure that these are cemented into the bottom by picking up points against them. They are 6-point gains from our perspective until we're completely clear. And okay, we've got 14 points in our mid-table, but it's far too early in the season. And if we don't pick up the points against West Brom, Fulham, even Aston Villa, where are we going to get our points from to secure where we need to be?
Okay, Mark Taylor says, what's Ian's thoughts on the Newcastle supporters letter to local MPs? Have you seen it, Ian? What did you make of it?
I must admit, I haven't seen it. When did
All
that?
right, well, I'll send you. There's been a template sent round. I mean, obviously, this comes off the back of Chion Wura as well, raising a couple of questions in Parliament. I mean, again, that has been a big, a big help, I think, really towards pushing and putting pressure on the government and on the EPL. What did you make of Chi's letters? Not her letters, the points that she raised in Parliament.
Absolutely valid, and I think it really does echo what the feeling of the fans, and obviously an awful lot of her constituents in Newcastle Central are on Newcastle fans. So absolutely valid. Of course, at the same time, Steve, we're still waiting for responses to the 2 letters that I've sent to the Prime Minister regarding other matters. So. The takeover is vitally important from Newcastle fans' perspective, but the whole question of governance of the game has been brought into focus in the last few weeks. And, the fan-led review, I think, is absolutely and utterly important. And I think, the Premiership, Premier League, just keep embarrassing themselves with the way in which they're actually behaving. I think to an awful lot of fans, the Premier League now are looking like a big part of the problem, not a solution to what the ills of the game are.
Yeah, it certainly feels as if there's something else going on in the background, Ian. I think that the truth will out eventually, and I think we'll still get this takeover. I'm still very confident. Liam says we have to stick with 4 at the back. Would you agree with that? Probably.
Aye, probably. Aye.
Okay.
I mean, until the midfield starts performing a lot better, and I think that you've got to have that shield for the goalkeeper. But having said that, what we're doing at the moment, it seems like quite often we're playing with 9 at the back. It isn't really protecting the keeper fantastically well. How we haven't conceded more goals on occasion, I think, is a mystery to me. But that's the way it's gone. And look, we can ride our luck, but I'm afraid to say, having a lucky streak and riding your luck and not conceding goals when you look like you're going to is no guarantee that that's going to continue into the future by any stretch of imagination.
Yeah, Chipper says, I wonder if we were going to play 5 at the back. He was dropping ASM for Hendrick and he wasn't happy. Then Bruce has changed it to make ASM look bad. I just think, we don't know, we might never know, but it just feels as if there's been some kind of bust up between them. And as we've said as well, Almiron doesn't look happy, but Almiron grafted, last night, wasn't smiling, but he put the work rate in again last night, but he just didn't look happy, did he? And I think creative players won't like playing in that kind of setup.
Yeah, well, I'm first and foremost. I wish Steve Bruce was capable of that sort of Machiavellian type thinking, in terms of changing the tactics of the team to make a player look bad, when they haven't got on the plane. I just don't see that in him at all. I'm not sure he's at all that calculating. I just don't see it at all. But I'm sorry, but I've got a downer on Steve Bruce. I just think of the sort of coaches which are coaching teams in the Premier League, and he's not in the same ballpark at all.
No, and Liam says Hendrick is the Irish callback. John Justice Allen says ESM offers all-out attack, but unfortunately he is in a team that is told to pass backwards. Put him in Liverpool's team and he'd be up for Player of the Season. That's a good point, John. Joe Walker.
Well, do you think he would get in Liverpool's team?
No, but I think what he's saying is if he was in Liverpool's team, if Liverpool signed him, he would be in that position. But I get your point, Ian. I think what he's just trying to say is that Liverpool's a more attacking team. They've got players who want to go forward. They've got players who want the ball. And from our perspective, we don't.
Yeah, we've got a few players that if you put them in a better team, they might look a much better player. But at the minute, they're in the team that they're in, and they've got to adapt themselves to playing in that set of circumstances. I'm not happy about it. I just think we look far too defensive. We don't play far enough up the pitch. We keep passing backwards. We used to call David Batty the crab, remember? Because he would. The thing was with David Batty, though, he got the ball in the first place. He actually got it. I think that given the players that we have in the side, I'd love to see us being able to release the ball from the back of midfield to the forward of midfield to the forwards much more quickly. I mean, one of the things which really frustrates me about watching Newcastle at the minute is the amount of possession that we just cheaply give away. It's awful.
Yeah, I would agree. We do that a lot, and it it is frustrating. But it's basics, isn't it? It's just basics that we can't get right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're absolutely right about basics. I mean, how many times do we get a throw in and lose possession? It just happens time after time after time, and these are basics on the training pitch. You could sort that out. But they just don't seem to get, it doesn't seem to be a priority for them. But giving the ball away to the opposition, it has got to be a strategic weakness. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, Chip is just saying apparently Luke Edwards reckons the players and Bruce had a meeting of how to play, etc. For me, 18 months in, that's embarrassing. If he's asking for advice on how to play, what do you both think? Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen that article, but if it's out there must be a degree of truth in it, because Luke is quite close, as we know, to the manager. Look, there's nothing. In my opinion, there's nothing wrong with having a meeting if things aren't going right, and you want to try and get to the bottom of it and resolve things. Then maybe that's the reason that the formation was changed last night. But it is embarrassing if a manager's got to do that. But maybe if he's addressing the problem, then I'm not going to criticise Steve Bruce for trying to address the problem and sort things out.
Well, that's fair enough, but I mean, it is fairly fundamental. It's like the old story of the manager that goes in at half time to his team and says, "This is the ball. The ball is your friend. You must keep the ball." And it's like and it's like that really. And I'm afraid to say that if you don't get that sort of silly little fundamental like that, trying to keep the ball, trying to retain possession, stopping the other team playing, you're going to get punished, particularly from the better sides. And I think last night, I think was a good example where, Crystal Palace, obviously without Wilfred Zaha, were a weaker side. Still got some reasonable players, but a better team would have punished us last night.
Colin Wilson says you can't drop Darlow. That is why we have competition for places. If you get a reward for doing well, i.e. keeping the jersey, then what is the point? Wieldy says we've got trouble with consistency. We could get hammered next weekend and play terrific the week after. It's a good point as well, isn't it? I mean, we have seen that with Bruce's teams at times.
Well, except for the play terrific bit, we win, but we don't play terrific. I'm afraid to say, Steve, I haven't seen any significant evidence of us playing terrific. I mean, look, the 3 points at home against Everton were very welcome. But look at who they had missing on the day, And as I say, better teams will punish us the way that we're playing at the moment.
Yeah. Chris Cooper says, Ian, have you had many of the consortium letters from fans pushing the takeover?
I've been contacted by a few fans, about the takeover, asking me to support it, which I think patently, obviously, have been doing. But I haven't had a sort of plethora of letters at the moment, not loads in them.
Okay, Liam says, after Fulham, I think we'll go on a run without winning games till January or February against Sheffield United or Crystal Palace. That's why our next 4 games are huge games. Yeah, he's right. The fixture list after that is it's a bit of a nightmare, but it's not as much of a nightmare if you've got points in the bag from these games, is it?
Absolutely right. I mean, what we want to avoid is one of those Pardew style seasons where you go into Christmas and you come out at Christmas with 30 odd points and then you struggle to survive at the end of the season. So we've got to get the points in the bag prior to Christmas and then pick up what we can when we can after that.
Yeah. Jody Jedi just says the O's a takeover. Chris Cooper says Spurs fans being charged £65 a ticket. What's your thoughts on that? I presume that must be for the first game that they're going to have with supporters in.
Yeah, I think with them being in a tier 2 area i.e. London, which I think is a mystery to some of us anyway. But with them being in a tier 2 area, they can I think have a small number of fans. £65 doesn't sound like an awful lot actually for there. You know, but I mean, you know, it does make a mockery of it when you've got a 60,000 seater stadium, which has got actually terrific facilities, and you're only allowed a couple of thousand fans in.
What did you make about that? You know, the fact that some supporters can go and others can't. I know we're in different tiers, but are you a supporter of that? You know, is it worth having a couple of thousand fans in at Brentford in our quarter-final game, do you think?
Well, I mean, it probably isn't for Brentford. I mean, it'll probably cost them as much to steward the game as it would in terms of the couple of thousand fans. I just think they've got the numbers wrong. You know, look, I can understand it. It should be a proportion of the capacity of the ground, and also it'd be very, very easy to do safety assessments on what facilities the clubs have got, what spacing they have between seats, etc. Very, very simple. You know, that information is readily available in terms of how the grounds are made up, because they're all registered with the local safety committees, you know.
Yeah. Question from John. He says, who would you give man of the match to last night, Ian? I gave it to Darlow again. I've got to say, you know, he kept us in the game. But that was my vote last night.
Well, I would have said between Darlow and Callum Wilson. Frankly, I mean, and although Callum Wilson wasn't massively involved throughout the whole game, he provides an outlet and he does manage to keep the ball. And I thought that, you know, for the 2 goals, he had Joelinton assisted Wilson, and Wilson assisted Joelinton. So, you know, getting the breakthrough goal was all important last night.
Yeah, it was definitely. He might not have had a great deal to do throughout the game, but when he was called upon, he did it. And fair. And I mean, look, I did say last night, fair play to Joelinton as well. Paul Oxley's asking the question. Yeah, Bruce got out of jail last night with a formation due to injuries. Steve, 11-game analysis on Joelinton. I gave me analysis the other night, Paul. I'm sure you were watching, but for me, I say again, he's not a Premier League player. He's not a Championship player, and he struggled when we played second division opposition in the cup. So for me, I still struggle to even accept him as a footballer. But look, take nothing away from him last night. He did what he's paid to do. He put some effort in. He set an assist up and he scored a goal. Now, if he does that on a regular basis, I might change my opinion of him. But I think we're a long way off from discovering the new Joelinton, and I might be wrong. It's my opinion, and that's what football, being a football supporter, is all about. Having those kind of football opinions, isn't it, Ian?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I still think there might be a player in there, but it's really the player that's in there, if there is a one, is really struggling to come out. But give the lad credit. Last night, this might be a renaissance for him. I would doubt it.
Yeah, me too. No fans in the stadium is keeping Bruce in the job, says Colin Wilson. I would agree with that as well. Probably. Liam says, what are our thoughts on Robbie Savage's tweet about us being 3 points off Europe? Yeah, I mean, look, we've discussed this before, haven't we? There's a lot of these pundits just do this to wind us up because they know that we'll bite.
Aye. Absolutely. I wouldn't give him the pleasure of a response on that, like.
No. Wieldy says, think last night's result papered over the cracks within Bruce's management. Got to agree on that as well, I suppose. Yes. Yeah. I mean, we both said that more or less anyway. Paul just says that you see Ashley behind us. Yeah, we've got Ian's flyer behind us on the green screen. So that is where he sits, actually, isn't it? Yeah, good point. John says, with the January window coming up, would you give Bruce money to spend and bring players in like Hendrick? Great question, John. Ian, would you give Brucey some money to spend in the January transfer window?
Well, if there was money available, you would hopefully that they would actually get something right, but I don't think there will be. I mean, I think if we've got, say, 25 points, I'd love to think we'd have got 25 points by Christmas, but if we're at 25 points by Christmas, I think Ashley will just bank it.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be an interesting couple of months, with, as I say, with the takeover still bubbling away in the background. When we come to January, depending on where we are in the league, he might have a decision to make. But yeah, we'll watch that with interest, John. I would say that Bruce probably doesn't have much of a control over who he buys anyway. I think there will be already players who've been selected by, those people responsible for scouting players, and there will be some suggestions. I would say I wouldn't be surprised to see a creative midfielder come in, but I would say other than that, I'd be very surprised to see anybody else come in. Wildy says we always used to play with attacking fullbacks and wingers flying down the wing. I think we have the players to do that again. I mean, we do, don't we? But it depends on the formation that he's going to play.
Yeah, I mean, I think the new lad on the left and Mankio both are capable of breaking down the wings. So let's what they need is an opportunity to do so with a different formation. I really can't see the point in having no sort of attacking capabilities without actually using them to the best. I'd like to see us go at some sides, but we just seem to want to sit back all the time.
Yeah, hopefully there's a change in the offing after last night's result. Colin Wilson says, Ian, can the government take control of the Premier League?
Well, what they could do is they could instigate a form of regulation. But of course, you've got to remember that this government are not great nationalisers, and they're not regulators either. They don't like regulators. They're very much part of the laissez-faire attitude towards governance and the economic programme. And so, it would be against their instincts. But having said that, it was in their manifesto that a fan-led review would be forthcoming. So let's wait and see. That's what we're trying to put pressure on them to do. That's why I wrote to the Prime Minister.
Nicholas says, we believe the takeover is still on. Mike is a clever bloke. No way will he get rid of Bruce and pay him off on his watch. New owner's problem. I believe managers are self-employed and under contract. Yeah, a lot of talk about Steve Bruce going, but I do think that as long as they're not at serious risk of going down, be very surprised to see Mike Ashley make a decision.
Yeah, I think he'll just stick.
Yeah, I do as well. I think he'll be here until the takeover goes through. I think that's there's no doubt about that. Barry Mitchison says, still think we played bad at Palace. We should be putting goals in at first half. Yeah, I mean the first half we had chances. It was an even game. That was the thing. I think that's what gets me when people don't understand what a smash and grab means, because it was an even game. Newcastle and Crystal Palace on paper more or less had the same kind of percentage, same amount of shots on goal. It was a very, very even game, but Newcastle nicked it. Like Magpies do. They came in and nicked it at the end, didn't they?
Aye, that's right.
John says, would like to see Clarkey come in for the rest of the season and keep him as part of the new setup if the takeover happens. He means Lee Clark, of course. A lot of people making suggestions for potential managers if Bruce goes. He would be interesting, wouldn't he? He's a local lad. He's got the club's best interests at heart. It's a lot of sentimentality with people like that.
Yeah, when I saw Clarkey, I thought he meant Steve Clark, who's managing Scotland.
No, him and Carver are doing okay up there.
Yeah.
Big shout out to newworkwear.com, specialists in the supply and branding of clothing for the workplace, who sponsor the StreamYard application that we use to broadcast the shows. And a big shout out to qtechshop.co.uk, based in Wallsend in Newcastle, and they knock up our t-shirts, and Ian's is in the post on his way to him, so you should get that next week. I hope it fits, mate. If not, we'll get you another one. NewcastleLegends.com is where you can buy them. Obviously, we've got a few different t-shirts on there, a few different offers. We've also got the mugs and the cups, but most importantly, as we're coming up to Christmas, we do have the calendar on sale. All proceeds going to the food bank in Newcastle, so get your calendar and help out the food bank if you can. Last half hour, still plenty of questions coming in. Great to have so many of you on the chat tonight. Liam says, I was looking at our fixtures because how inconsistent we are. I think we'll finish the season with 39 points, which will likely keep us up because of how bad 3 or 4 teams are. I mean, that is what Sunderland used to do, really, isn't it? They were down there for the majority of the season. They managed to put a run or 2 runs together, which got them just out of the mire, and there was usually 3 teams worse off. But you can't keep doing that, Ian, can you?
No, you can't, and of course that plans went dreadfully wrong on one occasion when they got a record low number of points. And was it 17 or something that they got? And then
That's
that
right.
was. And then that was subsequently bettered by Derby County with 14, I think. But that's when it goes dreadfully wrong. And I just think it's a very, very risky ploy indeed. And I think you take even greater risks when you allow the teams around you, the bottom four sides, to pick up points against you, which is what they did last season. I keep on going on about this. I think we got 9 out of 24 against the bottom four last season.
Yeah, Bede, we did cover this just a little bit earlier about Robbie Savage. Just ignore them, mate. Just ignore them. It's their job. It's what they get paid to do. They try to get clicks out of you and they try to get a reaction. Best to be ignored, those kind of pundits. Ian Hutchinson says, what are your thoughts on some teams having an advantage of fans in the stadium? We did touch on this a little earlier. For me, I think it's wrong. I don't think any fan should be going into grounds at this moment in time. Even if it's only 2,000 and there's 500 in each stand, it's still the fact that 2,000 people are travelling, if nothing else, especially in London. We've seen it at the start of lockdown 1, the amount of people getting onto tubes and buses, etc. And it's spreading the virus. And for me, I just think it's a bit irresponsible, Ian. That's my view, anyway.
Oh, well, I agree with that. It's quite clear. There's a big libertarian streak amongst the government's benches. And, they really are up for opening things up. But the thing is, we could open things up only to have it all closed down again as the hospitalisation rate goes through the roof. I'm sad to report, Steve, that only a fortnight ago we had 140 people who had tested COVID positive in hospital in Gateshead alone. And I'm glad to say that that's now down below 80. But we don't want to be up there again because the pressure it puts on the medical staff, and that's exactly what would happen. You would put such pressure on the medical staff, and we've seen what's happening now with sort of unfettered behaviour in the United States. There are states in America where the medics literally just can't cope with the demand, and we don't want that sort of strain being put on our NHS, because when other people who haven't got COVID really do need the NHS because they have a stroke or a heart attack or have an accident, we need the NHS to be there for those people. So, I think anything which is going to put that at risk has got to be thought about really, really deeply.
Yeah, I would agree as well. Julie Baker says, have the DCMS had Masters in front of them again last week? Does anybody know? I don't think so. I don't think so at all. Yeah, Man City are 5-0 up against Burnley. It's not looking good for Sean Dyche at all at the moment. Jody,
I think he's a good manager. He's just got no resources at his disposal. That's the trouble.
Zubair Khan says, Ian, are ministers directly involved in the Newcastle takeover behind the scenes?
I'd be flabbergasted if there were. I mean, I can only imagine that this government's ministers would want to cozy up to the Saudi Arabian regime, particularly with what's happening in terms of the economy. We sell an awful lot of stuff, particularly armaments, to the Saudi regime. And, they undoubtedly, from a governmental perspective, want to keep the Saudi regime sweet. So therefore, I don't think there is that sort of behind-the-scenes interference at the moment, because I think it would have gone through if there was.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it goes. Watch Football Focus, where they compared Joelinton, or Joelinton as Barry says, to Benteke, saying he was the same type of player. What do you two think?
I don't. No, I think Benteke has got a lot more physicality about him. Sometimes he doesn't display it to the best, but we have seen Benteke having really good spells previously, and we haven't yet seen that sort of form from Joelinton at all.
No, definitely not. For me, he's a different player altogether. But the
Yeah.
one thing they have got in common is they don't score goals.
Yeah.
Willie says, Wilson will be so important in Newcastle United this season. We look utterly toothless up front without him. He makes chances and poaches goals here and there. Tom Dixon says, Joelinton must have been training hard to play well last night. Chris Cooper says, my brother is Red Rural welfare manager. Easy for me to say. And they've been given an incredible fixture dates, i.e. December the 28th, January the 2nd, just to get the fixtures played. It's crazy. This is the problem, of course, when you start delaying football seasons at different levels, isn't it? And, you end up in that position, don't you?
Well, absolutely. And what I can see happening there as well is that, unfortunately, at whichever level that you're playing, if you're not playing on a regular basis, your fitness comes into question, and then what happens is when you get a run of fixtures of that nature, you then get what you wouldn't normally see is fitness-related injuries.
Yeah, it's going to play havoc with the local football. Chris, I do sympathise with you as a Dunstan fan. Paul Oxley says, question lads, is Carroll finished at Newcastle now? I can't see him getting back in the squad. If so, who would he get in for? Andy Carroll, injured again, Ian.
Yeah, well, that was surprise. You know, it's story of his playing career, really, isn't it? I must admit, I was surprised when they gave him another contract.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's only 1 year, and I know that essentially from his perspective, I think it's a 20 grand contract or something like that, isn't it? He's 20 grand basic, and then he obviously gets paid on games that he plays, and means it's a 20 grand basic because he very rarely plays. But yeah, interesting to see him get an extension.
But I mean, there was an awful lot of talk when he came to Newcastle that he was going to be on a pay for play contract, but they didn't mention the 20 grand basic at the time. And I think it's just unbelievable that he's got a 20 grand basic, and then the pay for play becomes irrelevant after that. So I just think that's bad business by Newcastle, frankly.
Yeah, me too. I would agree, mate. I would agree. Zubair says, would you be able to get Masters in on another DCMS committee, but this time you would be part of it?
I'm not part of that committee, unfortunately. I've been a member of the Education Select Committee in Parliament for 10 years. The committees have a fixed membership. It's normally around between 11 and 13 members per committee, but they are fixed. And, the only way that I would ever have a chance to get on that select committee as a member would be for somebody else to resign. And then I would have to be elected by the House to fill the vacancy.
Yeah, okay. Good question from Gaz. He says, do you think Joelinton would have been a better player if he'd come in under a better coach?
That's a really good question. He was raved about when he was across in Germany. And I still massively question whether he's ever a £40 million player. I'm not even sure if he's a £15 million player. But, anything that was in there seems to have been coached out of him by the tactics, but also, I just don't see who's putting an arm around him and showing him how he can improve.
No, but that's a great question. I do personally think that if he'd come in under Rafa, not that Rafa wanted him, but if Rafa had to take him on, he would have learned more from Rafa Benitez than Steve Bruce. But great question, that, guys. Colin Wilson, I would give Bruce money to spend now for a first-class ticket out of Newcastle. Just referring to when we were talking about would you give him money to spend in the transfer window. Kirk says, I remember when Savage whinged when the Newcastle fans gave him some stick at a televised cup match. He waxed the bee's nest with a stick. Yes, that's a great expression, Kirk. Tom says, Ian, what's your thoughts on Mike Ashley? He's offered Sir Philip Green a £50 million lifeline for his crumbling top shop.
Well, I think the 50 million, as the way I understand it, is meant to be a loan in order to keep parts of the Arcadia group going, including Topshop. But really, all that Mike Ashley is doing there is doing something that he's always done. When other retailers have problems, he sort of circles around vulture-like to pick up the good bits. It's very much his modus operandi.
Yeah, it's another reason, of course, why this takeover. He wants this takeover to go through, isn't it? Because he wants to buy the high street again. That could be something. I think there'll be a few political changes in this year, and I think because of the state of the high street, the government's going to want to see cash injected into it. And Mike Ashley's the man to do that by purchasing all these different shops and brands, etc. We need maybe a political change though with regards to the relationship between maybe Saudi and Qatar. Maybe something might bubble away on that, and there might be something that develops there. But look, for me personally, that I've still got faith in this takeover. I still think it'll go through, but I think there needs to be changes in different areas, doesn't there? And we need to get to the bottom what the Premier League's issue really is.
Yeah, but Ashley, in terms of his retail thing, he's an asset stripper. Let's not forget that. And he'll go in and pick out the good bits, and the rest of it will go to the wall. And I think it's well in excess of 10,000 people who are employed by the Arcadia Group, and they've got a big problem as well with that pension fund. So I think the pension fund are like one of the major creditors, and therefore Ashley isn't going to want to go in and buy up the Arcadia Group. What he's going to want to do is just pick out the best bits.
Good point. What does arbitration actually entail, says Joe Walker?
It means getting somebody to intermediate, to mediate, to be an intermediary, and come to a conclusion. Somebody who's independent to mediate and come to a conclusion. Somebody who hasn't got an axe to grind, that's sometimes quite difficult to find, because we all know that there's been an awful lot of conflicts of interest knocking around.
Yeah, okay. Liam, we've answered this a few times, but we'll talk about it. If we get new owners, should we go for Poch or Allegri under Ashley? We should get Eddie Howe until the takeover happens. Let's talk about if Bruce did go, it's hypothetical, of course, but is Eddie Howe the answer short term? You don't want to get into like a situation either where Eddie Howe comes in and then he's got to get the bullet, or he has a great run of games and you're sitting in a European slot and the new owners have to come in and make a decision like, oh, well, we'll keep him, because I've seen this happen before where a manager comes in. Glenn Roeder, prime example, great player back in the 80s for us, came back as a manager. A lot of love from of people of our era who remember that kind of those days. But goes on a great run, gets a job almost through sympathy, and then gets the bullet because ultimately he's not good enough to manage Newcastle. Yeah,
well, that's exactly right, and really, I'm not really a big fan of short-term fixes, because the thing is, if somebody's coming in on a short-term fix and they know it's a short-term fix, what commitment are they going to give, and what sort of confidence and discipline are they going to instill amongst the squad as well? Because the squad will know, well, you're only here for 6 months, mate,
Yeah, Adam Kavanagh's asking what I think about Tyson and Jones later tonight. It's a strange one. It's a money-making thing. It's just like Conor McGregor and Mayweather, but on a lower scale. Tyson, for me, was my hero growing up as a fighter. I'm a big fan of Roy Jones as well. You take out of it what you take out of it. For me personally, I just think it's a gimmick. It'll be good to see the highlights. I'll not be staying up till 1 o'clock in the morning to sit and watch that, I'm afraid. Definitely not. But great to see them back. Great to see them both back in the ring. I've seen the rules and regulations. They can't even knock each other out. It's not a fight. It's an exhibition. Get out of it what you want. I'll be able to catch up on it tomorrow after I've had a good night's sleep.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an entertainment. It's an entertainment.
Yeah. I'd rather see Tyson allowed back in the country so he can come and do some after dinners, because I put him on twice over here and he's superb.
Gateshead were winning 1-0 at half time.
1-1 now then. Man City still 5-0 up. Paul Oxley says, do you not think they should have just wrote off fans in Premier League games this season, as you're going to have some teams having fans and some not having fans in the ground? We spoke about that a little earlier, didn't we? But yeah, I mean, it's a bit like everything with this government, with this pandemic. That they're not really thinking things through, and it's just been a bit of a mess. I know nobody's been in this position for 100 years or whatever it is, but they should have had a better plan than what they've managed to implement, I think.
Oh, well, I'm afraid to say this, they've stumbled from catastrophe to catastrophe, and I think that mismanagement is it will not go down well in history, Steve. Put it that way.
Okay, Tom's just asking, do you think Gateshead will get promotion?
I'd love to think that they've got a chance. I think they've got a real chance of getting in the playoffs, and once you're in the playoffs, who knows?
Yeah, John says, looking forward to when everything's back to normal. Will we have a strange period of results when the ground is full again? Players might get a shock to the system as well as a few managers. It's a good point, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And having played now almost sort of 2/3 of a season now without any fans in the ground, I actually think if we get back to a full ground scenario before next summer, it will be a shock to players. I think it'll, they can be eased back in with a few thousand coming in to begin with, and then as confidence grows or a vaccine works, we might get more and more coming in. But I actually think it will be a shock to the system because at the minute it's been pretty sanitised, hasn't it?
It has, yeah. John, I haven't read Liam's latest article, mate, so I will have to catch up with that, mate. So maybe we can answer that on tomorrow's show. Yeah. Tom saying, should Carroll get a coaching role? Maybe that's what he's hoping for. He's come back home and he might be hoping to get on the get on the coaching team. Maybe he's a defensive header coach. Maybe. Based
on what? I mean, if he showed more leadership on the pitch, I would think, yeah, well, fine. But no, I cannot see it at the minute, like.
No, me neither. Nicholas says, whatever's going on with the SM, the tune giving his mate a contract is bent as Joelinton's price. Yes, Julie, you're right. My internet connection is horrendous again. Nothing I can do about it. I've got a slightly blurred picture, Ian, which is obviously down to Virgin. I'm definitely going to have to change my internet, unfortunately.
Well, I'm afraid to say I just dumped them. I've literally just dumped them, Virgin, I'm afraid. I've had Virgin internet, but I did start having some dreadful dropouts, and I've just had to dump them because they just couldn't seem to rectify it.
Yeah, it is getting worse, but thanks for pointing it out. JJ says, Ian, do you think we should use the army 24/7 at drive-thrus to give COVID vaccines?
That would be necessary if you had access to enough vaccine all at the same time. But I don't think I cannot see that happening. I mean, we might have bought some contracts to have huge amounts of vaccine, but it's not all going to be coming on tap like that. It won't, it'll come in phases.
Wealdy saying, think Joelinton's confidence has been at an all-time low. Fans and pundits berating him on social media. That can't be good for anyone. I really hope he kicks on. We have to get behind our players. It's a good point. I mean, I've criticised him on this show only last week. I said I would give him 10 games. I think I've been very fair. He chooses last night to have his best game. But, the best thing to do as a professional footballer when you're on that kind of money that he's on a week, I'm afraid, is just don't read the criticism. I'm sure people like Super Mac would tell you that, you just, if you don't want to read the criticism, don't read the papers and just get on with your job and try and put it right the next game, Ian.
Absolutely right. If he's a £40 million player and there's a £40 million player in there, it's got to come out somewhere, and that can only be done with him rolling his sleeves up and being very professional and getting on with the job.
Yeah, okay. No problem, Keith. It's life has to come first. You can always play. You can always watch on catch up. But thanks for that. Don't think Eddie Howe would want the job as caretaker, says Kirk. He wanted a season off anyway. He didn't want to be involved in football. Colin says, I think would be better off with Lee Clark managing a short term till something gives. Lee would jump at the chance. There's no doubt about that. And B. Taylor says, hi lads, sorry I'm late to the show today. A question for Ian, does he think the NCSL letter to MPs will get taken seriously in Parliament? Sorry if you've already covered this. I'll have to send you this over. They've done a template very similar to the Newcastle United Supporters Trust did for makes it easy for fans to send letters to MPs, but they do feel essentially that will help. It's political pressure, isn't it? It's getting your MPs to do the work for you, I suppose.
Well, absolutely, and of course the thing is, Newcastle fans, don't just live in and around Tyneside, and it's about getting to those MPs in other places, particularly from the government party. that'll have an influence. I mean, I can say to the Prime Minister sort of 40 times that my constituents are concerned about him, but it's water for duck's back because I haven't got a vote in his party.
Yeah, exactly. Joyce to win tonight or not, Steve? Yes, I do think Joyce will win. Steve Bruce said last night we're starting to see the best of Joelinton. I mean, what game was he watching? It's another one of those things. We've discussed Steve Bruce's media interviews. They're not the greatest, are they, Ian?
No. Sometimes he does seem a tad divorced from reality, and it's one of those. I'm just sorry. I think Gateshead have scored. Get in, right? I'm afraid to say that I think sometimes he's living in a bit of a fantasy world. Or he may have just been watching the last 5 minutes. I thought Joelinton played canny, when he scored and he did the assist for Callum Wilson. But prior to that, where was he? Look, let's hope that this is the turning point. But I'm not convinced.
No, definitely not. I think there's a long way to go. Paul Oxley thinks Tyson will win in 4 rounds. Kirk says Virgin Media. It's like 2005 internet. You're not wrong, mate.
Well, I mean, I think the infrastructure hasn't really changed significantly since it was put in by TeleWest, and then it was managed by NTL, and it's Virgin Media. It's the same stuff.
Yeah. I would agree, mate. I would agree. It's not the greatest. Have some other Premier League teams had a say in our takeover with the Premier League? Have Spurs and Liverpool been in the ear of them? It's an interesting point. I think there's certainly been corruption at the highest level in the Premier League, but I still think it'll all come out at some point, Ian. I think that's what this fans' pressure is all about. Yeah,
well, I think American ownership of clubs has had an impact. Operation Big Picture will certainly seem to be led by 2 American-owned clubs. Arsenal are the third American-owned club. The television rights company that were interested in promoting the European Super League was an American-owned organisation. So, it does seem to be that American-style sports ownership underpins an awful lot of that. And who knows if they're talking to each other behind the scenes. I would very much guess that that's the case.
John Justice says, political pressure is all about the numbers. If loads get behind it, it'll have an effect. If people don't, it won't. Get it done. Be proactive for the takeover. Good point. Boxing again, Scott says, do I think Dubois will be the next heavyweight champion? Long way to go before that, I think. He's got a lot to do. You think he's got the attributes to take over the division? We'll see. But for the moment, it's all about Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua at the minute. And there's a few other big hitters in there. The one thing about the heavyweight division is it does separate the men from the boys. And one punch, as we've seen with Anthony Joshua, can change it. You know what I mean? Whether he's knocking out Klitschko or he's getting knocked down and put on his backside and defeated, then, we've seen it all. And that's what makes heavyweight boxing probably the most attractive division when it's firing all cylinders. Paul Oxley says,
I was just going to say, and you think back to the sort of the heavyweight boxers that I kind of grew up with. One of the first heavyweight boxing matches I remember seeing as a kid was Sonny Liston versus somebody that was called Cassius Clay at the time. But these guys now, they make people like Sonny Liston and Cassius Clay look like lightweights by comparison.
Yeah, they do. Sonny Liston was one of my favourites as well. I love watching his fights. Great fighter. Paul Oxley says, Paul Oxley says, keep up the pressure in Parliament. Wilder says, it seems like the American-owned clubs want to run the Premier League like the NFL. It's a point that Neil Mitchell made on Friday night. Catch up with that on the Three Amigos. He did mention that, and there has been talk of that, and that TV rights seems to be the major issue. I think piracy is something that they've mentioned, but I think there's a project big picture. There's bigger plans ahead, and I think that's what the problem is. And I think from our perspective, I've said from the start, the truth will out, and it's whether the truth coming out will affect people's jobs and salaries, and that might be the turning point on this takeover.
Well, that's right, Stephen, and of course you see all of this develop in the American market. With 350 million population, which is a much greater market than ours is here in the UK. But what they've got their eyes on now is an international, worldwide market now in terms of TV rates, where the numbers potentially are just astronomical.
Yep. Yeah, I would agree. Please hit the like button. Just hit the thumb up. It does help us. Click share as well. Share the program. Subscribe if you're a first-time viewer. Please, everything helps. Great crack, lads. Keep fighting our corner, Ian, says Colin Wilson. John says, last night could not have got better. Newcastle won and Fleetwood won. Sunderland won. Yeah, Joey Barton continued his jinx over the Mackhams. Nicholas says, last night Mitch nailed Hoffman, Northern Rock and his golden handshake taken off him. He hates the North East. He is the villain. Keith's asking, who is our favourite heavyweight boxer and what is the favourite fight of all time? Ian?
Well, Muhammad Ali, my favourite heavyweight boxer. And, I go back to the sort of, Muhammad Ali, Foreman, that's Frazier. They were great fights from that perspective. So exciting at the time,
Yeah, William Kane's calling me a liar. Sonny Liston, I can't remember him, and I'm 58. Yeah, I meant, obviously, I've watched a lot of these fights on, that are available on videotape when I was a lad, and Sonny Liston was one of my favourites. My favourite heavyweight of all time is Rocky Marciano. And of course, I'm too young to remember him as well. But that's what I meant, William. So sorry for the confusion. But yeah, I love both of those fighters. For fighters who have lived heavyweights that I've lived, though, I've already said Mike Tyson was my hero, and that's who I grew up with watching.
Right, Rocky Marciano, Joe Louis, Max Schmeling, all those sort of fighters, and there was I think a British boxer called Don Cockell, as well, which so I remember my dad used to watch those fights with us because there used to be programs on in the 60s when I was a kid. My dad used to watch like these old boxing matches on black and white TV where they showed the reruns, fantastic stuff,
When Sky first set up as well, they did some wonderful documentaries about these fighters, and I've just watched another one. It's a recent one on Sonny Liston, and it shows you how easily influenced he was by the mob. We've seen a few. We've seen the death of Maradona this week, and I saw a documentary on him where the mafia had got into him in Napoli, and once the mafia get their claws into you, you're absolutely knackered, and that's what showed on the Sonny Liston documentary as well as on that. But yeah, I mean. Favourite fight as well, he asked. I mean, there's been so many favourite fights. I think, for me, just to see Tyson crowned as the world champion, the world heavyweight champion was great. But I think for me, just for atmosphere as well, just being at a fight, just seeing Anthony Joshua box in Newcastle, it was probably the biggest fight we had. On his way. Have you got a favourite fight? I mean, the thriller in Manila and the Rumble in the Jungle are two great fights. But obviously, again, I was alive, but was never conscious of them. But I've seen them on video. They're great fights.
But also at different divisions as well. I used to like the likes of Sugar Ray Leonard and Marvin Hagler. Great boxers. Tommy the Hitman Hearns. We're all fantastic boxers, really, really great.
Yeah. Jack Dempsey was a killer, says Geordie Jedi. Thumbed up, lads. Going to catch up with the vid later. Cheers. Thanks, Keith. Paul Oxley says, need the mafia to get hold of Steve Bruce.
No, they should buy him a train ticket he can't refuse.
That's brilliant. Paul Oxley says Eubank versus Ben. Yeah, I mean, that was a great era as well that we lived through. You know what I mean? The Eubank, Ben, Watson, McClellan, and there's some great fighters back in the 90s. Dr. Rockler says Frank Bruno. Brilliant. Tom Dixon says, Steve, we should do a boxing show one night. That would be brilliant. Never know, mate. You never know. Marvin versus Sugar Ray, says Shawnee. And Keith Rose says, Marvellous Martin versus Tommy Hearns was ferocious. One of my all-time favourite fights. Anything with Roberto Duran as well was great. Yeah. I'm lucky enough as well. I've brought a lot of these boxing legends to Newcastle and Gateshead. So we've had some great memories.
I would have liked to see Clarence Acuna in the boxing ring. He looked a hard little bugger, didn't he?
He was. I got my very first signed shirt off him. He was kind enough. I looked after him on the doors quite a bit when he was in Newcastle, and he came down before he left and gave us a signed shirt. So it was very kind of him. Top lad. When Ellie finished in that hour's passed quickly. Got to say happy birthday to two promotion legends sharing the same birthday. Kenny Wharton, local lad. Of course, happy birthday to him, and happy birthday as well to Martin Thomas, who was one of the goalkeepers in that wonderful era. And if you want to catch an interview with Martin Thomas that I did at the start of lockdown, just look on the playlist for 1980s players, and you'll be able to find a wonderful interview that I did with Martin, who's still at the Welsh FA, but still keeps an eye out for Newcastle results, and is a big Newcastle fan.
Who was the keeper that went and joined the police force after he retired from football?
Kevin Carr.
Kevin Carr. All right.
Kevin Carr, yeah, he was in the police force. Yeah, we've had, again on that 1980s playlist, I interviewed Carsey during the lockdown period as well, and there's a great interview with him. So if you want to catch up on some interviews with some ex-players, check out the 1980s and 1990s playlist, and there's a few great interviews in there just to get you through your Saturday night. Ian, as always, absolute pleasure to have you on, mate, and listen to your views on Newcastle United. Look forward to getting you back on again really soon, mate.
My pleasure. I'm just off to cook me curry, Steve. Okay.
Enjoy that, mate. Take care. Thanks a lot, Ian.
Cheers, pal. Thanks.
Great to have you on, and don't forget, phone a friend. It's our call a family member or friend that you haven't spoken to for a while. A little campaign that we started off at the beginning of this particular lockdown. And here's the video with the ex-players. I'm back 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon with the worldwide squad. I will see you then. Take care. Have a good night, whatever you're doing.